In this demo, we're going to use vFunction integrated with Amazon Q Developer to modernize our legacy monolithic application by re-architecting and refactoring to cloud native. We'll focus on three core areas in vFunction. Starting after the dynamic and static analysis, we'll look at vFunction's suggested domain design and the technical debt to-dos on modernization plan to correct the architecture and make it AWS container and serverless compatible. vFunction will guide Amazon Q Developer in fixing the architecture. Finally, we'll extract services from the monolith. So this is vFunction, and we're starting after the dynamic and static analysis has run, and vFunction suggesting to me what my domain design is, or my logical separation of my business logic in our simple order management system here. The circles or spheres represent those domains. So we've got domains like fulfillment, order, payment, shipping, domains that I would expect and domains that I would probably draw manually on the whiteboard if I needed to. The lines between the domains represent calls, so method to method calls between them. The size of the domain represents the number of software components or classes needed to deliver it. Let's just look at fulfillment here. That's this one here. Fulfillment has two entry points or boundaries or capabilities. We can explore them further and see what those capabilities do in both a call tree and component-based view. Then vFunction's underlaid the software class requirements needed to deliver this capability during runtime and the static dependencies to support them, and the resources and constraints it runs under. So things like database transactions, network messaging, stored procedures are all identified there. The color coding on my screen relates to the exclusivity or the uniqueness or the physical separation at the code level. Green being highly exclusive and unique, red being very low exclusivity. So we've got some overlap there, and this aligns to bounded context in domain design theory. This suggested architecture can be changed by me as a software architect if I need to. I can combine domains together. I can separate them out, I can create entry points, or I can take vFunction's suggested architecture if I want to. vFunction then gives me a set of to-do tasks or modernization plan, a set of activities to correct the technical debt, the entanglement, the complexity, the exclusivity, the compatibility issues of this application. What I'm going to do is going to focus on one specific to-do, but you can see we have to-dos here like high debt classes, which are entangled and complex, unnecessary business logic or dead code that potentially we can remove, and resource exclusivity where we've got overlapping constraints around database access in this example. I'm going to focus on one to do here. So we've got a service dependency removal to do. It's suggesting we remove a service to service dependency or call to increase its modularity and simplify the application. Now vFunction can create for me a Gen AI prompt, or I can interact directly in my IDE, in my code assistant, directly with vFunction. Just to point out that the problem we're solving here is this dependency between these two domains. So we have a service to service call or a domain call, a method call between fulfillment and order that is suggesting we correct. So let's jump into the IDE and see how we utilize that to solve this problem. So I'm now in Visual Studio Code, and I've got the Amazon Q developer plugin to interact in real time with my source code as a persona, as a developer here. And we've integrated vFunction and Amazon Q Developer via the MCP server capability. So Amazon Q Developer can query vFunction for understanding of the software architecture and the to-dos and corrections and what we need to do to improve our software application. So I'm going to start by asking it what my to-dos are. So what are my to-dos? And it's going to go away to vFunction and find out exactly what the to-dos are that we need to solve to correct my architectural issues. So it's going to give us the to-dos that we saw there. So some high priority ones around some high debt classes that need unentangling, some cross-domain issues, including our service call between fulfillment and order that we're going to look at, and we've got some unnecessary code that potentially we can remove. I'm just going to ask it to give me a bit more detail around this order controller before we go ahead and solve that issue. So tell me more about domain order controller. So it's going to query vFunction, find out all we need to know about the order controller, what it's doing, its capabilities, here as well. I can ask lots of questions to vFunction, maybe understand what the resources and constraints are, view component-based views, and all interact really directly in my normal environment as a developer, my IDE, and using Amazon Q Developer to do that interaction. So it's given me all the information about this, the key issues I have, what it's doing, how it interacts. So knowledge that it wouldn't have directly in the IDE, and Amazon Q Developer wouldn't directly have without vFunction. So now I can just go ahead and solve that to do. So I can ask it to fix the service call to do, and it will go ahead and fix that for me. So I'm now back in vFunction after we've solved those to-dos, and vFunction's reprofiled and reanalyzed the application with the runtime and static analysis dependency data. And this is what our application, our monolith, now looks like. Our domains are now logically separated. We've cleaned up unnecessary service calls. We've increased the exclusivity, and we've made it compatible with AWS container and serverless technologies. So what I can do is go ahead and extract out one of these domains, so we can run it maybe as a container or as a Lambda function. Just to point out, vFunction has marked any of the to-dos that we've corrected now as done. So the problem has gone away for those as well, and identified any new to-dos if there were any. So I'm going to go ahead and extract our order. So order is a capability of our application. It has three capabilities. It has create multiple orders, create a single order, and fetch an order is its capabilities. Let's go ahead and extract that out. So I'm going to click extract and then go to service creation here. And it's going to give me a dialog to configure how we want to extract out and create a new software project and populate that with the business logic for order. I currently have a Spring application, Java 8. I can leverage some embedded capabilities in vFunction with Open Rewrite to do some upgrades, or we can later use AWS Transform or Amazon Q Developer again to do any upgrade process. I'll leave this as the default here. Key things to note are we'll wrap the receiving method calls with REST API endpoints and define the data transfer object. So that should make it easy to communicate to our new service. And vFunction sorted out shared components and put them in a common library for me. So things like logging, security and validation functions are there. Now the process is quite straightforward. I click download, it gives me a set of design definitions and documentation. So we have a design definition that's going to feed our utility code copy to build this service, some documentation here, Swagger config for my REST API endpoints, my test harness there, and the same for the common library. So I go ahead and take them and this code copy utility directly to my development environment. So here we are on my development environment. I'm just going to do this in the command line. Obviously, I could do this in my IDE as well, and I can use Amazon Q Developer to do this for me with more automation. But we've got the order definition downloaded from vFunction. In the app folder here, we have the original source code, and we have the code copy utility. So this is my original source code that we're starting with, so my full repository, and I'm going to use the code copy utility across that, give it the definition from vFunction and the name of the new software project we want to create. So vFunction creates for me a new software project, populates it with the relevant source code and the relevant configuration, in my case my POM file here, minimizes that config, and we're ready to go and build this. So straight away we've extracted out that runnable business logic. I can compile it, make my binary as it were for the order capability. I get a build success. Any unit tests in there will be pulled through for me as well. So we can go ahead and just run this, unit test this here locally as a Spring Boot application. So we're running this, and I'm just using an API test tool here to test the three sets of capabilities for order. So let's try them out. So can we create an order as an API test? Yes, we can. Can we create multiple orders? Yes, we can. And can we get an order? So quite straightforward, obviously using vFunction, solving the architectural issues there, and then extracting out a domain and converting it really into a separately runnable service outside or alongside of the monolith. If we go back into vFunction, I just wanted to show you a more comprehensive application here. So this is a much larger application than we were playing with earlier. So 11,000 software classes, a couple of million lines of code here.
but still really clear and easy to understand following the domain-driven design principles here around the complexity and entanglement. I have a similar number of domains and capabilities in this application, obviously much bigger domains, obviously a lot more entanglement to unravel, but the same process applies. So quite straightforward to use vFunction to refactor, re-architect my application.